Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Tara Thorne, an arts journalist turned writer and director whose first feature, Compulsus, opens theatrically in Canada this Friday, October 11th, just as her second feature, Lakeview, is making its way through the festival circuit. Compulsus is an intense queer thriller about love and revenge, while Lakeview is considerably less fraught. It's a dramedy about a group of old friends reuniting at a lake house, but they both work, and Leslie Smith is really good in both of them, so you should check them out. Tara chose Hustlers, Lorene Scafaria's energetic 2019 true crime picture starring Constance Wu, Jennifer Lopez, Lily Reinhart, and Kiki Palmer as exotic dancers who find a way to exploit their high-powered patrons by drugging them and maxing out their credit cards, knowing the wolves of Wall Street would find it too humiliating to report getting scammed by strippers. It all goes great until it doesn't, and that's where things get really interesting. You'll see. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I chose Hustlers for a couple reasons. One, Lorene Scafaria wrote one of my favorite It Happens in One Day movies, which is called Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. It's a very cool New York movie. I know this is anti-Canadian, but I'm not the biggest Michael Cera fan. But he works very well. The type of guy that they needed for that movie, he's great as, and Kat Dennings. And is there a term for those, like one day movies? Like an Empire Records, a Booksmart, Days of Confused. I love them.
Yeah, there must be.
I've never seen like a catch-all term that I think sounds good. But she wrote that, and that is what turned me on to her directing career, which began with Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, which was okay. But then The Meddler with Susan Sarandon and Rose Byrne, incredible. And then this movie, Hustlers, is her third outing as a director. And it's a movie about sex workers. And it is a movie that shoots women with respect and admiration as opposed to exploiting them. And I thought only a certain number of directors would even consider doing that. And I would also say Jennifer Lopez is someone who's been around my whole life. I was there for the first Bennifer. I was there for this Bennifer. I really want it to work out for them. I think it's great. I don't really have an opinion on her as an entertainer in any direction. She's just been famous for a really long time. Jennifer Lopez in this movie is so incredible. And I believe if you were on the fence as like a bi-curious woman and you went and saw Hustlers, she pushed you off the fence into gay. I really believe she did.
It's funny, the word that I keep seeing, because I was looking through a bunch of reviews, just getting the pulse of it, and people did seem to get it, which is great, because it is such a smart film, and it's so clever about the way it does what it does. And yeah, I agree with you. It's not exploitative of the actors, but it is also the genius of the film is that we are aware that they are exploiting themselves, right? Like there's a process aspect to the film, which it brings it in line with Goodfellas and all these other wonderful stories of people narrating their hustle and demonstrating this one weird trick, right? Like all of these films are about somebody figuring something out, but the scam here is simply empowerment and refusing to be dismissed or underestimated.
Yeah, and empowerment inside like a different type of empowerment when we get to sort of the midpoint and the market crash happens, and then they're like, well, actually, none of these men are affected. None of these men that we've already been making money off of are affected, but my life is. So I'm going to take it back in multiple ways. So using your sexuality, something that you've been dismissed for, to gain financial power. It's incredible. And it's a true story. It happened.
Yeah, it's an escalation of the power dynamic that already exists, right? Not an inversion. They just keep pushing forward because they're written off, because they're like given no other thing. But the word that I did keep coming across in the reviews was hypnotic, mesmerizing, similar terms to that, because what they're saying is that Jennifer Lopez casts a spell on you. And I don't know that that's fair. That seems reductive. But then I watched the scene where she performs on the rooftop in her fur, and it's like, holy shit, that's exactly what this is. Like she is bewitching Constance Wu in a really literal way to bring her into her fold. It's like, now that I've been watching Agatha all along, it's like, is this a coven? Is that what this is about?
And that's also it too, is that it becomes a story about female friendship. And like when Jennifer Lopez enters this movie dancing to Fiona Apple's Criminal, like find me a better needle drop. It is shot from like the back. It's not like her butt's out, but we're not like following her butt around. We're seeing her as an athlete, and they're pushing in slowly, slowly, slowly on Destiny because she's like immediately in love with this person, and not in a sexual way. She's just in love with her as a person. And then, yeah, the climb into my fur bit seals it. And as the movie goes along and they gather more folks, Lily Reinhardt and Keke Palmer and all those folks, it becomes this like ensemble comedy drama. And then they become literally a real family where they're all celebrating Christmas together.
Yeah, it's so warm for a film that is about all the things that it's about, like all those tangled things which you can kind of reduce to, it's America, like it's just dog eat dog, stripper eat client, whatever you want to call it, dancer eat client. But it's never cruel, right? Like it's never hurtful. These are characters, they're people who support one another and themselves through something that is reasonably white collar-y, considering like with all the drugging and it is just credit card fraud in the end, and some mild assault.
They're drugging them, but they're not like doing anything to them. If the roles were reversed, it would not be that.
Exactly. Like this is a culture that is right. Like they're steeped in roofie warnings and self-awareness, and they're using a safer version of that on their marks. Yes.
Although one of the funniest scenes in the movie is when they're like making their recipe up and they cut to them passed out on the floor.
Yeah.
They're just flat, no music. It's like, oh, that was too much.
It is great. And it's also so smartly cast that way too, because everybody is like either legitimately sympathetic, genuinely nice people, or they're douche bros who had this coming. Like there is, I love the sensation, the suspicion creeping in that every single one of these men has roofied someone else. Like this is all payback. There's a karmic thing going on. They can't do it on an economic scale, but they can do it on a moral scale.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing that sort of undoes them and undoes Destiny's. He gets a call from someone who's like, I lost my job, my house burned down, my mortgage payment is connected to this. Can you refund me? And then, that's what drives the wedge between her and Ramona. Ultimately is Destiny being like feeling too much for someone. And it's like, no, he would not feel that for you. Don't fall for it.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna, even to your point about it's a war movie. Like when you see, so the film jumps around timelines. We're kind of in current day where Destiny's being interviewed by Julia Stiles for this New York Magazine profile that came out in 2015, and those scenes are very like they're leached of color. They're very white and beige and very locked off. And then when you go to the past, when you're in the strip club, when you're hanging out with the girls, full of color, full of life, full of noise, the camera's moving around. The movie is very explicit in terms of who it's on side with. Where, you watch a Scorsese movie sometimes and you're like, I think you like what these men are doing. But in this one, it's like, no, you're with the girls here, even if you believe that they committed crimes. It's like we're on side with them.
Yeah, I mean, we are encouraged to root for the criminals because they're the least bad criminals. Like there are other people doing far worse shit in the corners, and it's possibly right there in the room, but they're just not giving in. They're maintaining a moral level, even if it's like exclusively about protecting themselves. And I think this is the other place that the Goodfellas illusions come in, because it is about being inside a mob and kind of liking everybody. And in this case, they really aren't doing that much harm. It's not like, oh yeah, Jimmy's a nice guy, but eventually he's going to kill you. That's just not what happens here.
It's like, it's all, the bottom's going to fall out. Even when J-Lo gets arrested, it's cool as hell. Like she's like, they're following behind her and Royals by Lord is playing and she gets like arrested at the ATM. It's like everything she does is cool in the movie.
Yeah.
We love her.
I do have to put in a plug. That ATM is around the corner, or it's down the street on Prince and Sullivan from the Dutch, which is my favorite restaurant in the whole world, and is great. And you can see the Dutch in the movie, and Okay. The other thing is that I know the proprietor. Yeah, this always sounds so silly. Andrew Carmelini married my oldest friend, opened a modest restaurant empire in New York, did the show actually way back when. He's in one of the first episodes. And the Duchess is his second restaurant and my favorite, and just it's wonderful. And it's turned up twice now. Prince and Sullivan has been a location. It's in Hustlers, and it's in a film that was released to Apple TV called Sharper a couple of years ago. Right. And they use the same ATM, and it's like, wait a minute, Sharper's doing that deliberately. Sharper's also about con artists and hustlers.
Oh.
So now it's like it's a feedback loop. It's a meme.
I love that.
Yeah, but the royal scene is way more cool and sort of consciously aware of what's going on in that scene, and how, of course, in the end, they're going to get brought down because the law doesn't protect them, right?
Yeah. I mean, to circle back to your empowerment bit, it's like they find it, but of course they lose it again. And the last line of the movie is, the whole world's a strip club and everyone's just trying to, what is it, get theirs, or everyone's paying for a dance. It's like very cynical, but accurate.
Yeah, it was always, I mean, that's the thing, right? These movies do have to have some sort of larger moral in the end. Although here it's simply that you learn from this, you reconcile, and you move forward. But yeah, of course they couldn't, you don't write about it in New York if they got away with it.
Yeah. It's like, these ladies are doing this and we can't find them. What kind of story is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a single newspaper article, right? It's not a larger program. You don't get Julia Stiles for that. Yeah.
You don't need anyone to option that.
Yeah. I want to pivot briefly into Scafaria's own career because she is such a fascinating artist. Like, she hasn't made another film since Hustlers. It's been 5 years, and I assume she's working on something. I have to hope so. She's turned up in the Jennifer Lopez documentary, and she produced a movie called Under the Boardwalk, an animated musical film that she co-wrote, of which nothing has been heard.
I know. I saw that. I looked at the picture. I'm like, is this right? Okay. But she was directing Succession.
Yep. Yeah. She's been bouncing back and forth between TV and film all along. She worked on New Girl, and she wrote on Ben and Kate, which is a fascinating forgotten show from Fox. It was the series with Dakota Johnson and Nat Faxon, Oscar winner for The Descendants, recently in Our Flag Means Death. She has this fascinating history because she's also sometimes an actor. She plays a version of herself in a movie called Coherence, which, if you haven't seen, I think it's on Prime Video in Canada. It's brilliant. It's a science fiction. It also takes place over the course of a single day. A science fiction film about an event that affects almost exclusively a bunch of people who've gotten together for a dinner party in a remote house. And something cosmic happens, and they end up in this bizarre fractured situation of reality. And she's one of the more reasonable characters. And right after that, this was right after she had made Seeking a Friend for the End of the World. And I did the junket for that, and I met her, and we talked about the fact that she'd made a different version of, like, basically Last Night. As the Canadian in the room, I had to bring it up. It's like, there's another movie like this. And she said, yeah, well, this is different. And she's right. It is. It's very different. And I kind of like it. I think there's something really interesting about that film that holds up now, 10 years later, when it feels like the world is ending all the time, to see a film that kind of gets the depressive state of it, the fact that there really won't be anything to do but wait it out. Yeah,
and I mean, like Last Night, which feels like maybe a budgetary option. You like when there's an apocalypse movie where they can't afford the apocalypse, so it's it's like, what? How do you work around that? And Seeking a Friend for the Other World, I love Steve Carell, but I didn't love the Steve Keira Knightley thing. I didn't love them as love interests, but then it's like, well, get off your high horse. It's the last day of Earth. Give Steve something, I guess.
Yeah. Everybody gets that in the end. They all it's despair that has to be put somewhere, that has to be channeled somewhere. And they're never really, they're not really lovers exactly, which is, I think, what saves it, right?
One kiss.
Yeah. It's more about comfort than anything else.
Yeah.
And then she makes The Meddler, which is also a pretty small project.
Yeah, incredible movie though. Imagine Susan Sarandon as your like mom stand-in. What a casting coup.
Yeah, but it never feels like I'm working stuff out, right? Like it isn't that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
film.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It's just really insightful, really sharp, and funny. Like it is very, very funny in a way that I don't think anyone gave it credit for. Like she's a really great comic writer, but that's never what her films are about. The
Yeah.
comedy just emerges. It's the same with Hustlers, which is funny, but
Very
it's
funny.
situational comedy. It's about
Yeah.
reacting to the absurd stuff that's going on, as opposed to set up punchline, set up punchline.
Yeah. And I remember when I saw Hustlers 2 and it was like it was at TIFF and it was immediately in the Oscar conversation and just as immediately fell out. And it's like I don't remember what the big movies other movies were that year, but watching it again, I was like, Lopez was truly, truly robbed.
Yeah, I think they couldn't figure out how to run her. Is she a lead? Is she supporting?
Right.
Because I mean, she would have probably been put forward as a lead, even though, like, this is a weird analogy, but it's a Silence of the Lambs situation, right? Where
Yeah.
Hopkins is clearly he's in it for 40 minutes. He is not a leading role.
Yeah.
Lecter is not a leading role, and yet that's how they nominated him, and that's how he wins. With this, like, Constance Wu is so clearly the point of view character, the central character, but that's a Training Day situation, right? Or Last King of Scotland, where the showiest, biggest performance and best performance, because Lopez is great, comes from somebody who's not really the lead. So you wind up in this pitfall, and I do suspect that a larger sense of, oh, it's just Jennifer Lopez dancing, like, people, I don't think people watched it, I think, is
Right.
what ultimately happened. I don't think the people who needed to see it saw it.
I could imagine that. I could also imagine Lopez herself not wanting to go supporting. Knowing what we know of her, she doesn't take. She's not number two,
Yeah. Well, positioning her as the lead could have worked, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a good path. But that was the year. I'm trying to think what else. That was Jojo Rabbit and Joker and
It's a terrible year. What? Like, it's funny to see Joker 2 coming out now and getting terrible reviews and people reevaluating their relationship to the first movie. And I was like, you were always wrong. I don't know how any of that happened.
yeah, I haven't seen the sequel yet, and I'm really in no hurry.
No.
Hated the first one.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm a fan. And it's like, I love Gaga. I love when she sings. And that's great. I just got to note that my mic maybe is different. Does it sound different?
No, you sound fine.
Right. Okay.
It sounds pretty consistent. Yeah, I'm just looking at, yeah. So the winner for the 2019 Oscar was Renee Zellweger for Best Actress for Judy, for playing Judy Garland, which, sure, but she's.
I mean, the movie was meh. I thought I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you win, right? Like
Yeah.
and no disrespect to her, it works for everybody. You play a real person, you have a much better shot at winning a big prize. But yeah, I mean, she was up against Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, and Charlize Theron for Bombshell. So,
Wow.
3 real people. That was okay. So, actress was a good field. I'll give them that.
Yeah. But it's also like, I don't know, do we talk about any of those movies now? I mean, this is not a Hustlers conversation anymore. It's becoming an awards conversation. But
We'll get back to it.
and also, like, does like an Oscar make something better or worse? I don't think it does, but I do think it does, like, raise the recognition, and then and then for Lorene Scafaria, maybe would have made another movie since.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
that is something that happens to women. It's like, Luca's kicking 2 out a year. Yorgos Lanthimos 2 every 6 months. One of those guys has a movie out. But it's like, women, even if they do well, and the movie did do well at the box office, it made over $100 million. It's like, maybe she just doesn't have anything. But I can't imagine you don't tee up the next thing.
yeah, certainly an adaptation nomination, right? At the very least, would have been appropriate. But yeah, it's no longer enough to make a movie that is well received, well remembered. 5 years later, it's like, oh yeah, that's good. That's a good movie. And what strikes me as really weird was like this was the year of Parasite, which is ultimately the same storyline, right? Like if it's incredible that the two didn't resonate, next to one another somehow in the awards conversation, because they're both about the class war and the divide that is ultimately insurmountable. And it just happens that, Hustlers finds a more fun way through that story. Not that Parasite isn't incredibly enjoyable, but Hustlers is the crowd pleaser version of this.
Definitely. And yeah, it's like, was it too fun and frothy? I don't know. You see a movie like Anora, which is very similarly themed, and it's winning all the awards. Isn't that interesting? And I love Sean Baker. But to my original point of not shooting the women lasciviously, Anora opens with a pan down a row of asses. And you're like, and I saw Sean Baker's Letterboxd review of Hustlers, and he basically said, I think this movie was overhyped for me. I thought it would be more like a Grindhouse movie. And it's like, you would have made it like a Grindhouse movie is the difference. It's just interesting. I really love him. I loved Anora, not as much as Red Rocket, but he's an incredible filmmaker, but it's interesting just the way lenses are applied, the metaphorical lenses, if you will.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week I wrote about the disc debuts of Osgood Perkins' Longlegs and the 3-hour reinvention of Tinto Brass's Caligula, two very different movies that somehow wind up in the same place, aesthetically speaking. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. Not the film I would have made is something that you hear all the time, and it's like, that's why you didn't make it, man. Like, the whole point of the film is that it's someone else's expression.
Yeah, totally.
And Hustlers is, it's joyful, it's fun, it's brightly lit, as you said. Like, the aesthetic is inviting and welcoming, and you are allowed to appreciate not just the characters, but the character work. Like, there's a range of actors in here, and I wonder if this isn't because Scafaria is sometimes an actor herself and just wants to offer people this new window into perceiving other characters, like Lizzo and Cardi B, and like there are musical performances in here, and Lopez herself, who turned out to be really great at holding the camera, holding the scene. I mean, there is. Lopez has always sort of walked the line between the two. One of her first films was Selena, but she's got the presence and the poise and all this other stuff that is from a lifetime of performing. And some of it is acting and some of it is dancing, but you buy her instantly. And you also buy her as someone who feels she doesn't get the respect she deserves, which is really interesting as well, because she is one of the most recognizable celebrities on the planet. She's in and out of the tabloids, whatever else is going on. But she can put all that away for this film, for this role. And that's the thing that no one gives her credit for, that she's not just playing herself. She's actually disappearing into a character.
Absolutely. There's this thing that film critics do where they're like, this person is too hot for this regular person job. Charlize Theron would never be a minor. It's like, okay, but it's a movie and that's where we are. And I do feel like Jennifer Lopez actually is too hot for this space, but she's absolutely believable in it, in just the way they have her hair, the way she's costumed. Like, she's kind of tacky. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just, she does actually disappear. She's so strong and cool. She's funny. She's deceptive. You'll see that she does anything to survive. And it doesn't even, like, she and Destiny both have kids, and Destiny ultimately rolls on Ramona for her kid, but you never get the sense that Ramona's doing anything for her daughter. It's just like, here she is, I'm keeping her well, but she never mentions her. It doesn't come up. It's not really what she's doing it for. She's just like trying to get paid in America.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is the sense that she has never gotten the one break that would have vaulted her into something else, that she just didn't. And for whatever reason, maybe it is because she's flinty and self-serving, and somebody at one point who had the opportunity to give her that break just went, oh, I know there's something about you I don't like. And Ramona she's not a victim, but she perceives herself as one, which is made her prone to lashing out and protecting herself and deciding that someone else will screw her before, or deciding she has to screw people before they screw her.
Exactly.
And that is like a very American point of view.
Absolutely. And she does have that line in the fur coat scene where she's like, I was a centerfold once in 93. So it's like it's been a while since her dream died.
Yeah. And
it's we're in 2007. Yeah, it's been a while. It also says she's been working at this for a long time. And actually, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, one of the best scenes, is when she shows Destiny a bunch of stripper tricks. She's like, front hook, back hook, spin around this. This is called the carousel. And then she makes her dance on Cardi B. It's just like camaraderie. We love it. It's just the girlies.
Yeah, and I love that part of the process film as well, where you just get let into a world through the most practical way. Yeah. The nature, like, we've discussed it, the nature of the scam is that they had to test it. They had to figure out how you don't kill someone.
Yeah.
And which cards to use and how to use them and which ones are likely to have a limit and which ones are likely to not. And all these things that are folded into the, obviously it's straight from the New York piece and it's educational, but also just, there's just enough distance so that you can't fully, no one is going to come away from Hustlers going, oh, this will work. This is the plan.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely not aspirational. William Goldman had a line that I feel like is a quote anyway, but it's like, audiences love to see doing. It's like, don't tell them about it, just like show them. So another thing that Hustlers is it shows them failing a lot. Like guys walk away, their cards crack out, like they mess up. So it's not just like, oh, these girls they had it immediately, climb, and then crash. It's like, no, it's up and down the way it probably was.
Yeah. Nobody ever talks about how much work goes into a successful scam.
Right?
And good for them. They persevered.
Yeah. It's a good ethic to have. Good work ethic.
Yeah. And it's also a glimpse of a world that doesn't exist anymore for a number of reasons. I mean, it's remarkable to me that this was released just, 5 months before the world shut down and strip clubs stopped being a thing. Yeah. Although there was, I remember the weirdness, we covered it now, of was it the Zanzibar or Fillmore's? It was one of the Toronto clubs that started actively petitioning for reopening and came up with all these weird excuses about how, no, we'll have distance, we'll have, we'll create safe spaces before vaccinations. How did they pitch it? They said it was like the thing that their clients needed the most.
Sure.
To prevent their complete collapse and basically acknowledging that the regulars had no other outlet or life or connection, or like that was, they had to throw their regulars under the bus and say, these pathetic men need our dancers. They need them. And they need the services they provide and they need the comfort. And it's like, you're just trying to find a way to sell lap dances during a pandemic. That was like, forgive the naked pleading, to just let them resume their business. And it was absolutely fascinating. And then once the vaccines finally started rolling in 2021, there was another story about, and it was, I think, Fillmore's, they established clinics. They had vaccination clinics for people who couldn't necessarily get them any other way, people without health cards and people who were undocumented. And that was the good luck story, the good news story.
Wow.
That came out of all of it. So there is a weird argument for, these places are okay. They are serving a community purpose, but they can never fully detach themselves from the profit motive and the exploitation of the people who work for them. And Absolutely. Like Hustlers is so on that.
Yeah.
Just before.
And actually, you make me wonder what they do about cash now. Is it just like, do they all have a square? They just
hanging off the G string. That's a horrible image.
Yeah.
Contactless means something very different now. But in the movie, it's all bright and happy and fun, and the music is constant, although it's not constant within the film because there's no score, which I didn't realize until this last viewing. They just don't need one.
Yeah, they really don't.
And the movie never tells you how to feel about anything you're seeing, which is the most fascinating thing. Like, the music is always, the song score, the soundtrack is propulsive and active and engaging, and it never asks for sympathy. because that's, I think, the music that's playing in their heads all the time. Like
Yeah.
that's why the royal scene works so well to me. It's like that's what she's listening to, even if she's not wearing headphones.
Yeah, yeah,
That's in her
yeah.
head in this
And
moment.
when they go to buy the big SUV, and it's like Britney comes on and they're like, "Oh, this is my jam," and they start dancing, and they just cut to the two like older men just staring at them. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of I kind of like a movie like this. I'm sure she would have been encouraged to have like a recognizable male villain, like an actor we know that keeps coming up. Like maybe he's some rival strip club owner, maybe he's on a cop who's onto them, blah blah. All of the men are completely generic. I think of a movie like Promising Young Woman, which I really loved, and a genius casting move that it had was it cast a bunch of beta boys, and in
Yeah.
the parts of all the men that were harassing her, Adam Brody and Sam Richardson and all these folks, and this kind of went the other way by not casting anyone, and then you don't feel anything for anyone, good or bad. But I have to imagine she had to resist, studio interference on like, can't Ryan Gosling be in here as like a cop that everyone has a crush on or something?
Yeah, we need a Benjamin Bratt type.
Totally.
But she's not making a Law and Order movie. That's the thing, right? Like you don't need to have two sides of this. You're inside. Yeah, it's funny. Nobody complains in Goodfellas that there aren't FBI agents who keep showing up at the door.
Right. Even the framing of using the journalist is used very sparingly. Like you could argue that you don't even need it because they just put, little supers on when they jump around time anyway. But but yeah, it's definitely by women, for women, about women, which is so rare. It's what I try to do. It's so rare, and I love it when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, even the casting of Styles as Elizabeth, as the journalist, is interesting because this is an actor who refused to participate in her own exploitation. Like she just disappeared for a couple of years and then came back
Yeah.
in smaller roles because that's what she wanted for herself. That was the career she chose to pursue. And I'm sure that wasn't lost on Scafaria, who was coming up around the same time.
Definitely.
And yeah, the other weird thing I want to point out, not entirely just for gender balance, but this was produced by Adam McKay and Will Ferrell, which I find absolutely fascinating. Like they spun off a second banner. They have the Gary Sanchez Productions, and they invented Gloria Sanchez Productions with Jessica Elbaum to make sure women could make their movies too. And there's a lot here that ties to the stuff that McKay was dealing with in The Big Short. But again, completely different perspective. They did not impose a point of view on the film. They let Lorene Scafaria make the movie she wanted to make.
Yeah, it's probably what got it made. They had a breakup, didn't they? Farrell, Adam, and Will. They're not like friends anymore.
I don't think they're working together. I think, yeah, the shingle still runs though, because they're still producing stuff, but I think they're no longer really collaborating. I'm not really sure what happened.
I feel like I read like an Entertainment Weekly expose about it, and it had to do with casting. It was like
Oh,
John C. Riley was involved. I don't know. It's too bad.
yeah. I mean, nobody tells me anything. But the work they're doing as producers is still really sound. And it's weird that, I mean, I guess I was going to say it's weird that nobody pays attention to it culturally in terms of the landscape. But of course, that's probably why it's probably what they want. I can't imagine that McKay and Will Ferrell would want to do the red carpet for this movie because it would just pull focus.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it just shows that they're smart as producers to diversify their portfolio and not just do sports comedies.
Yeah. I mean, those things were profitable enough. Let's throw the money around and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to what you were saying about what you try to do in your own work, because that's obviously the other reason that we're here, is you have a movie coming out and another movie on the festival circuit. So yeah, I'll set it up a little bit in the intro, but it'll be the short version. So the question I usually ask at the end of the podcast is if there's something from the film you chose that's worked into your films. I'm not ready to wrap up yet, but I am curious about whether or not there is a through line from Hustlers to Compulsus and your other work.
I don't think explicitly. Compulsus is quite colorful, which so is Hustlers, but I wouldn't say one influenced the other. It's just sort of a nice fluke. What I will say is that I thought about Hustlers a lot when I thought about how to shoot intimate scenes in both films. And I have this rule, and I've had women DPs on both films, so it's not really something that needed to be said, but I have this rule, which is no lascivious camera. It's like we're never leering at women for the sake of it. It's just not going to happen, and especially when it's queer women too, it can get really bad. If you look at a movie like Blue is the Warmest Color,
Famously.
yes, famously like shot like porn, and it's like, oh, it's okay, and like, all types of. I don't want to sound. I am a prude, and shooting intimate scenes is difficult for me, but they're necessary because we're making movies about contemporary queer women, and it's not about closeted people, and it's not about hidden desire or anything like that. It's just like these are women living their lives. So it's necessary to include it, and I'm not saying you can't uh appreciate the body. Like, I'm not that much of a prude, but we're not looking at it for the sake of it being there. I always say the difference between gay directors and lesbian directors is gay directors will put a bare butt in for no reason, and lesbian directors will put hands in hair. So that's the butt of for me.
The butt of the lesbian.
That's right. His hair play. So Hustlers is always a film that I do think of and point to in those conversations where it's just like look at a movie like this, which is about sex workers, and the camera is not leering at them. It's not being gross. It's just like it's showing them as strong and capable and athletic. So that's certainly an ethos that I brought into both movies.
Yeah, it's a celebratory aesthetic, right? Like it's not
exactly.
It's not exploitative, but it's aware that they are. Well, this is what we were saying at the top, right? Like they're complicit in their own exploitation, but only up to a certain point. And the movie honors that and gives them the best possible lighting package, right? Like it is about how amazing these people look in their chosen jobs, and then you get to see them in sweats and without makeup, and it's just like, no, these are human beings. They don't always glisten, right? Like that's a choice, that's an application. Hustlers is deliberate about what we see and what we're allowed to see, and it's because the characters choose what to show us. And like that's the thing that I find really interesting, that absolutely had someone else directed it, maybe even there are women who come from the commercial realm who would have gone for the slickness and the glow and the gloss, and that's just not what this is about.
Yeah, you're right. And she just wasn't interested in it. She was interested in the relationships that forged this whole scam in the first place. It's like a one person couldn't carry this off. She needed her sisters with her, if you will. And it's like, who were those people? And side note, we have not mentioned, but I do want to shout out Lily Reinhart, whose character quirk was that she barfs when she gets scared. And it's so funny. You think, how often can they do it? The answer is a lot, and it's amazing every time.
It is a great runner, and she's great. Like, in terms of physical comedy, like that is like even the retching is funny instead of gross.
So good, and to your point, like she's someone who you're like, oh, here's this willowy blonde. We could write her off very easily, and she's like, no, I throw up. I have this quirk where I throw up, and my parents kicked me out because I do this. So you're like drawn to her immediately. She's like a beautiful stray cat.
And Keke Palmer, too. I don't want to let her go unmentioned because she is having the best time.
She really is. And she's got this like runner where she keeps talking about her boyfriend Dragon, who's in jail, and like how long will he be in jail and how can she get him out of jail? That's why she's stripping. It's just to support Dragon. And then she like just goes up on her own. It's amazing.
Yeah. And every single person in this movie has a full career somewhere else. Like Trace Lysette, who shows up for a few minutes, is doing something, but she's here because Scafaria knows who she is and wants her there. Like there's that other sense of an ensemble, working in an ensemble movie because somebody wanted to put the gang together. And you just get the feeling that I would love to know the story of who was Lopez produced it. So I'm assuming she was the first on board, but who did everyone else come for? Like, what was the attraction? That's what I want to see, not in Hustlers, but about the making of Hustlers. I want to see the "you son of a bitch, I'm in" moments where everybody gets pulled on board.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because it's a great cast.
It is. And that is something else in Lakeview, which is my second film that's on the festival circuit now.
Mhm.
It's an ensemble comedy. I mean, dramedy, let's be real. There's a lot of crying.
It's a little
And
heavy, yeah.
yeah, a little bit. And it's and that togetherness, we don't have a ton of it. And it's hard to shoot, by the way. It's hard to shoot a bunch of people in a room, and they were doing it with mirrors. I don't know how it happened. So, we do have a few like group moments that are inspired by that sort of like everyone's getting along and it's really cacophonous, and you focus on whatever interests you the most. And I love that vibe.
Yeah, how do you keep it from turning into an Altman film where it's all just people talking over each other?
ADs yelling at you. That's how. They shut it right down.
But it does feel real. Like in
Yeah.
those scenes when there is a lot of activity, Lakeview has there's a life to it that makes you believe that everybody knows everybody maybe too well, and there's just all that crosstalk over people wanting to say something and then stopping, and other people just barreling forward. Like it feels real. It feels organic.
Thanks. We tried. And a lot of those folks are friends in real life, which is also just a Halifax perk. It's like when you're casting locally, everyone knows each other. So everyone does have some sort of preconceived, notion of each other coming in if they're not BFFs, which has happened both times.
Yeah. I mean, that would be handy. Halifax, like the whole East Coast is having a moment. There's some great stuff coming out of there.
Yeah. It's been a good year. I think this is the first year at the Atlantic Film Festival that everything I saw was Canadian minus one thing. That's never happened to me before. And
Nice.
4 of those things were local. So it was awesome.
Excellent. And where, because this is going to go out on Tuesday, where can people find Lakeview next? Where is it going on the circuit?
They haven't announced it yet, so maybe I shouldn't say. I will just say it is Central Canada in November.
Okay. We can let people figure that out.
Yes. And it's gay. It's a gay festival, queer festival. The West is not interested in me, so thank God for Central Canadian queer festivals.
Seize the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
My thanks to Tara Thorne, whose thriller Compulsus is in theaters across Canada this Friday, October 11th, and whose second feature, Lakeview, is making its way around the fall festival circuit. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire Shedden. She knows what she did. You can find Tara on Instagram at ThornyHFX, all one word, THORNEYHFX, and you can find Hustlers on Blu-ray and DVD from Elevation Pictures in Canada and Universal in the US, where there's also a 4K release. It's also streaming on Netflix in Canada and Hulu in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can. I'll see you next week.